What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Bass Fishing Declassified. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the 3 rules of late summer buzzbait fishing. Let's get into it. The first rule of late summer buzzbait fishing is trust the process. What I mean by that is that throwing a buzzbait in the late summertime is a 100% commitment. You usually aren't going to get that many bites on this bait in a day, but the bites you will get are usually going to be really quality fish. The buzzbait I like to throw whenever I am using this technique is the War Eagle Buzz Toad buzzbait. Now I actually switched the trailer that comes with it for just a black zoom horny toad. I like the 3/8 ounce size in all black. Something about this buzzbait just has the perfect sound for me. I have tried a bunch of different buzzbaits over the years, literally like dozens of them, from clackers to some more subtle ones, different wires, different shapes, but I always come back to this buzzbait here. I probably have 20 of them in my tackle room and like 10 of them in the boat right now, and I wear them out to the point where literally the blades will fall off or break because I throw them so much. Now, the deal with these buzzbaits in general is that they have this kind of squeaky sound after you use them for a while, so you really want to make sure you wear them in by either tying them to like the windshield of your car and letting them go, or just putting them over the side of the boat when you're running down the lake, and just leave your line hanging over the side of the boat with the bait in the water, and then that blade will spin as you run down the lake, and that will get that blade broken in and it'll squeak a lot more. That was not related to this rule number 1, but I thought it was a good tip anyways for buzzbaits. I also always put a trailer hook on the back. This is a 3/0 Gamakatsu trailer hook, so I always run a trailer hook because I usually don't get hung up that bad with it, and it helps get more fish in the boat. Anyways, other than the bait I throw specifically, with a buzzbait, again, you're not going to get a ton of bites. And another thing about the buzzbait in the late summertime is that it's not just an early morning bait. That's a super big misconception that I see a lot of guys have with the buzzbait, is that they think they only need to throw it in the early morning time of the day. But you can catch fish all day long on this buzzbait. The challenge is, though, is that the bite window is a lot of times very unpredictable. So you may really only get bit for like an hour or 2 out of your day, and you'll get 10 bites in that hour or 2 window, and you won't get any bites the rest of the day. So it is a very big commitment, and it takes 6-8 hours of throwing it to catch fish and put them in the boat. But there's so many tournaments that are won in August and September on a buzzbait, and also like a whopper plopper style bait, which is another option. I like a buzzbait more than the whopper plopper, but that's just me. And you can basically throw this thing for hours without a bite and then catch 15 pounds in 30-minute to 1 hour window. I don't know why that happens, but it happens consistently for me. And the worst thing you can do with a buzzbait this time of year is put it down. You're going to get discouraged a lot of times throwing this deal. You're going to throw it and throw it and throw it, nothing. But if you can work through that, you catch a lot of fish, and really good fish. And that's how a lot of tournaments actually get won this time of year. And a lot of guys don't talk about it. And even if they get told about it, they don't want to put the hours and the commitment into actually throwing it to put enough fish in the boat. Rule number 2 for late summer buzzbait fishing is cover a ton of water and don't repeat the water you're fishing. This is something that is very tempting to do, and it's also very hard to cover enough water a lot of times when you're first trying this technique. I always have my trolling motor on a 6 or 7 out of 10 when I'm using this technique, and I am just covering as much water as possible. I will get into a creek, and I will just start running down that creek. Just start at the mouth and work my way all the way to the back and just fish and fish and fish until I start getting some bites. I don't always try to pattern this buzzbait super specifically in the sense of like, I'm only going to fish the back half of the creeks, or I'm only going to fish the mouths of pockets or the backs of pockets, because a lot of times I'm surprised even that I'll get more bites in the pockets in the first half of the creek, and then the next day they're biting in the back half of the creek in the pockets, and then the next day they're on the main lake stretches biting. A lot of times it depends on the weather and the wind and a lot of other factors, so I try to take each day one by one and fish the moment, my other YouTube channel, and really just focus on trying to cover a ton of water with this bait. When I say cover water, I'm talking about my foot is on that trolling motor going 6 miles per hour, and I don't stop that trolling motor. I'm probably covering a minimum of 3 miles of water per hour, because you may have to slow down a little bit, make some turns and stuff like that. But I'm going to cover hopefully 2 to 3 miles of bank per hour and just keep going. And that's a lot of water to cover. But you'll eventually get some bites if you do that by just putting your head down and grinding it out. You will end up starting to develop a pattern in terms of if they're on the steeper banks, the flatter banks, if they want to be in the shade pockets, if they want to be behind boat docks, if they want to be around some type of shallow vegetation, you will start picking up that pattern. But at the onset, I don't get too bothered by that when I'm throwing a buzzbait. I just get on the bank and just cover water. I'm on a small lake today, and I made an entire loop of this entire lake in like an hour. And it's not that big of a lake, and I wasn't able to really get any bites, and so I didn't really continue throwing the buzzbait because I took a full lap. And usually it helps throwing a buzzbait when you're on a bigger lake, like a lake like Beaver Lake, Table Rock, Grand Lake, where there's a lot of water to cover. On smaller lakes like this, it's kind of more of a hit or miss deal because you're either biting it really well or they're not. So I would recommend trying this technique on bigger bodies of water, but it can be super effective, guys. You just have to really trust that process. Rule number 3 is find stained or dirty water when fishing a buzzbait in the late summertime. There are 2 really good options for this late summertime topwater pattern. It's a buzzbait and a whopper plopper. Whopper plopper style baits, like a Berkeley Chapo, are a lot better, at least for me, in a little bit clearer water when you have 3+ feet of visibility. But when you get less than 3 feet of visibility, that's where the buzzbait really becomes a player. I have caught fish in clear water on a buzzbait, especially in the post spawn, but in the late summertime, I just don't have that much success with a buzzbait in that really clear water. So I'm always hunting that 3 foot of visibility. Moreover though, I find that there are always very specific water clarities that the fish like to set up in. You may find one day that they like to be in 2 foot of visibility, the next day in 1.5 feet of visibility, or maybe one lake to another, they like to be 1 foot versus 1.5 feet versus 6 inches. And that 6 inches of water visibility difference can make all the difference. It happens all the time on Grand Lake in Oklahoma when I throw that buzzbait. I will find that I will go around the lake and find small pockets of dirtier water or a little bit clearer water and get bit, and then I will get back into a different clarity and stop getting bit. Usually what happens this time of year is that there's going to be more stained water back in the pockets or sometimes further back in the creeks, and then the main lake will be clearer, and what you need to do is maybe find some pockets with a little bit of runoff with that slightly dirtier water, or maybe a section of the lake that just is overall a little bit more stained up. And so, like I mentioned in the last rule where you want to cover water, not only do you need to just cover water, but you need to have an intent of trying to find the right water visibility for this buzzbait. It's also interesting that the sun and sky conditions can affect which water clarity is better. A lot of times on those cloudier days, those fish like to be in slightly clearer water. So you may find that that 2 to 3 foot of visibility is better on a cloudy day compared to on a sunny day like this, where the light penetrates a lot. Those fish may prefer to be in that like 1.5 foot visibility range. And it's not like the fish will move necessarily, but the fish that are willing to eat this buzzbait will basically only want that buzzbait in a certain section of the lake with that certain water visibility. You'll also find that there are certain sections of the lake that have more rock or more grass or all those things. They'll also help this bite and that the fish like to set up around. So you do have to kind of hunt the right type of water for this buzzbait bite. So I wouldn't just get in one section of the lake and just run a mile of bank and just keep going and just never pick up the trolling motor. Instead, I would fish a big section of a creek, maybe run a full mile of a creek, and then if it's not working, run 2 or 3 miles or up or down the lake to try to change water visibility, and then do the same process. You don't need to worry again so much about the sections of the lake and the bank angles and all that stuff at the beginning, but that water clarity is something to actually pay attention to, and I think that that's the most important factor with this buzzbait bite, is that water visibility. Now, if the water visibility is completely consistent across your entire lake, then the buzzbait bite might be a little bit tricky if the water visibility is very clear across your lake, and that's where you go to like a whopper plopper style bait over the buzzbait. But if your water clarity is relatively dirty all across your lake, you should be able to usually find slight water visibility changes still and get that buzzbait bite to work really well. As far as my gear on that buzzbait, I'll kind of walk you through that as well. Basically, I already talked about the buzzbait itself, that War Eagle buzz toe buzzbait. It actually has a little keeper for that toad on there. That's why I also like this buzzbait. It'll hold that toad on better. And I'll just pair this always on braided line. I always throw my buzzbaits on braid, always have, and I find that it doesn't cause me any issues with losing fish, I can throw it around cover and rip it out of wood and trees and bushes and all the kinds of stuff you might get hung up in. So I'm always gonna throw braid. I throw 65-pound braid. A lot of guys like throwing 50. I just find that I can cast easier with 65, and it's probably overkill strength-wise, but I've always just used 65-pound braid with it, and it always has worked for me. So that's what I throw, and I'm always pairing that on a 7-foot, either medium heavy or heavy action worm and jig rod. So this is actually a 7.2 heavy, which is a little bit stouter rod for this buzzbait, and I kind of like that at times when I'm trying to fish around really thick cover. If I was going to be fishing more just kind of sparse open banks, then I might go to like a 7.2 medium heavy, but I find myself throwing a buzzbait a lot of times on situations where I'm throwing over big laydowns and logs and in thicker grass around lily pads. So I'll go to that heavier action rod so I can kind of just get them out of there. And you don't really want to like set the hook super hard on a buzzbait, to be honest, because if you set the hook really hard, what you're going to end up doing is tearing a hole in their mouth with that braid. So when those fish bite, all I'm basically doing is just reeling into those fish, just pulling a little bit, and then usually that gets them in the boat pretty well. If you find that you're losing fish with this setup, with that heavy rod and that braided line, you can always go to like a 7'2", 7'4", moderate action rod, or like moderate heavy, something like that, that has a little bit more bend to it, and that will sometimes help you lose less fish. But I don't really have that big of an issue. I just kind of have always thrown something between a 7.2 and a 7.4, heavy to medium heavy, just kind of whatever I'm feeling. It's not that important, to be honest. And then I'm throwing this right now on a 6-to-1 gear ratio reel, and as I was throwing this today, I really didn't actually like this Black Mex on here. I would actually like to go to a 7-to-1 just to keep up with that bait a little bit more. You don't have to make as many cranks of the reel handles, so 7-to-1, even 8-to-1 gear ratio reel is probably better than this. So I'll probably switch this out actually when I get back to the house, because I didn't really like that today. I've been switching reels around a bunch. I actually turned that, this is actually my normal reel I threw my buzzbait on, which is a 7-to-1. It's a Max Z or Max Pro or something like that. It's a 7-to-1 gear ratio. This is my normal reel, but I wanted to try this on a jig, so I switched that out recently and threw this on there. So not the biggest fan of the 6-3-to-1, so 7-to-1 is definitely better. But that's kind of the deal, guys, with this late summer buzzbait fishing. I know it wasn't maybe like the most encouraging video in terms of like making you want to go do it, but I will tell you that there are so many tournaments to get won on Grand Lake, Table Rock, on clear water lakes, dirtier water lakes, you know, Lake Dardanelle, places like that, all over my region of the country at least, that are won on a buzzbait this time of year. And it's kind of one of those deals where I wouldn't say it's a hero or zero. It's definitely not a hero or zero. If you know what you're doing, you can definitely pattern this and get on them pretty consistently, especially on a one-day tournament. It's not great for a multi-day event. If you're fishing 2-3 day tournaments, not the best pattern. Maybe try to find something offshore. I have been burned pretty bad, and I know a lot of buddies who have been burned where they catch 15 to 18 pounds one day on the buzzbait, and the next day they kind of don't catch them just because it's a little bit of a fickle bite. But for a one-day tournament, it gives you a really good shot of winning. So great deal. If you don't have a lot of time to practice, also it's great if you don't have time to find offshore fish or go, you know, find something really special. You can just pick up that buzzbait day of the tournament, no practice, and just roll. And a lot of times you can have a really good shot, as good of a shot as almost anybody, to win a tournament. So hopefully this video is helpful for you guys. If you're enjoying the Bass Fishing Declassified content, make sure to leave a comment down below. And other than that, we'll see you on the next video.